Hey guys, tonight we're diving straight into the most scandalous sheets of ancient Egypt, the sinful lives of Egyptian pharaohs. They weren't just rulers, they were walking tabloid headlines. Think divine power, endless gold, and enough keep it in the family drama to make a soap opera blush. Behind the pyramids and propaganda were affairs, betrayals, forbidden rituals, and diets that would kill a modern gut in a week. Pharaohs had the most powerful job in the ancient world, unless you count being their cat, which, honestly, probably paid better and involved less incest. So before you recline your chariot of a mattress, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy my rambling journeys into history's weirdest places. Drop a comment with your favorite pharaoh or just the temperature in your room right now, because let's be honest, we all wish we had servants fanning us with palm leaves. Dim those lights, fire up a fan, get comfortable, and maybe tuck your toes in so the sacred scarab beetles can't nibble them. But have you ever wondered, what did pharaohs actually do all day, besides posing dramatically and pretending to be gods? How many gold-plated hats does one mortal need? Was being worshipped all it was cracked up to be, or did it mostly involve paperwork, sand in unfortunate places, and a whole lot of complicated family dinners? Did anyone actually want to be buried with 400 jars of their own organs? And how did we let hats with literal cobras become a status symbol? Tonight, congratulations, you've just woken up in the new kingdom, ancient Egypt. Somewhere between 1500 and 1200 BCE. The sun is already burning, your wig is slightly crooked, and someone is chanting your divine titles from a scroll longer than your attention span. Welcome to the Pharaoh's Day. Let's get started. The morning begins not with a snooze button, but with the persistent pounding of temple drums and a squadron of priests chanting your name at sunrise. As pharaoh, you're expected to rise with Ra. Bad news. Ra doesn't care if you were up late banishing your enemies or binge-eating figs. Divine rulers do not get to sleep in. And even your dreams are subject to interpretation by someone in a leopard skin kilt. You open your eyes to a room already humming with activity. Servants darting in and out, some lighting incense, others straightening the canopy over your bed, and one, inexplicably, reciting your official titles out loud. Apparently, your ego needs as much propping up as your head does. And what better way to start the day than with a reminder that you are mighty bull, great of strength, son of the sun, wearer of many hats, master of all that is and also some stuff that isn't. It's a mouthful before breakfast. You try to blink away the sleep, but the air is thick with the scent of lotus oil and anticipation. There is no chance of rolling over and ignoring the morning. A pair of priests stand at the foot of your bed, gazing at you with a mixture of awe, expectation, and thinly veiled impatience. They're holding ceremonial fans and, for some reason, a live duck. No one will explain the duck. Maybe it's symbolic, maybe it's breakfast. Either way, it's staring at you like it knows your secrets. In your royal chamber, sunlight is not just a backdrop, it's a performance. The architects designed your palace so the first rays of the rising sun slip perfectly through a narrow window, illuminating your face like you're starring in a soap opera titled Days of Our Dynasty. This architectural flourish is meant to emphasize your connection to the sun god, Ra, but mostly it just means you get blinded before you even make it to the wash basin. Being a living god on earth comes with responsibilities, none more immediate than pretending you're thrilled to be awake. As the priests continue chanting, now up to your 37th official title, you're escorted from bed by a pair of attendants whose sole job appears to be fluffing your pillow and looking slightly disappointed in your posture. You try to recall if you dreamed about crocodiles last night. If so, someone will probably want to interpret that for a fee. Now, the first task of the day, purification. This involves ritual washing with water sourced from the Nile, filtered through linen cloth, and poured by a servant who is definitely judging the state of your hair. Cold, fragrant water splashes over your face. You shiver, not just from the chill, but from the knowledge that at least 6 people are observing how you wash your ears. You make a mental note to decree that gods deserve privacy, but suspect it won't stick. Breakfast is next, but not before the high priest delivers a short sermon, essentially a daily pep talk in hieroglyphics, reminding you that, as Ra's chosen, your every action is cosmic destiny. You're not just eating bread and onions, you're symbolically sustaining the universe. No pressure. By now, you're awake in the most extreme sense. You've been sun-blinded, scrubbed, chanted at, and presented with a live animal. There is no room for morning grumpiness in your schedule. Instead, you're hustled toward the day's first ceremony, a blur of incense, hand-washing, and formal greetings with officials who look just as tired as you feel. But none of them have to pretend to be a god before breakfast. As you stride toward the sunlight, servants fall to their knees and palace cats slink out of the way, apparently aware that, historically, stepping on the pharaoh's foot is a bad career move. You put on your most divine expression, nod wisely at the assembled crowd, and try not to trip over your own linen kilt. The day has officially begun, and all you wanted was 5 more minutes. The truth is, for all the gold, incense, and adoration, being the living son of the sun comes with one undeniable downside. The sun never hits snooze. Before breakfast, it's time for an army of servants to slather you with scented oils, line your eyes with kohl, and wrestle your head into the day's wig, because being semi-divine is no excuse for split ends. Meanwhile, sand infiltrates every layer of your personal grooming routine. Ancient Egypt. Proof that beach hair isn't always a compliment. The royal morning spa is not a place for modesty. There are no towels, no doors, and definitely no do not disturb signs. Instead, you stand in the center of your chamber as attendants arrive in waves, one with a tray of salves, another with a basket of linen, and a third whose only job is to sweep sand off your feet faster than Ra can put it back. You wonder if anyone has ever invented a broom that works on dignity. First up, scented oils. Your skin must gleam like the sacred bark of the gods, and the only way to achieve that look is by being basted like a ceremonial turkey. Servants dab and pat and slather until you're somewhere between a living deity and a particularly enthusiastic salad. The aroma is overwhelming. Myrrh, frankincense, maybe a whiff of something that smells suspiciously like your cousin's perfume. On the plus side, the oil keeps your skin from turning into a parchment scroll by noon. On the downside, it's a magnet for dust flies and the occasional over-friendly palace cat. Next, eyeliner. Kohl isn't just for show, it's a shield against the sun and, allegedly, evil spirits. You sit very still while a makeup artist traces perfect lines around your eyes with a tiny bronze stick wielded like a weapon forged by the gods. The first time you sneezed mid-eyeliner, an entire ritual was held to ward off demons. Now, you've learned to hold your breath and hope the itching stops by lunchtime. The end result is a look fierce enough to intimidate enemies and conceal the fact that you're running on 3 hours of sleep and a prayer to Osiris. Now for the wigs. No, your natural hair is not acceptable, not for a divine ruler whose daily existence is 75% humidity and 25% wishful thinking. Real pharaohs change wigs the way modern people change passwords. Often, reluctantly, and only because someone is watching. Your personal wigmaster steps forward with today's options. Long and luxurious for commanding presence, braided for intimidating scribe conference, or the classic short bob for just get me through this. Each wig is crafted from human hair, sheep's wool, or the mysterious leftovers from last year's headdress collection. Fitting the wig is a production worthy of a parade. Beeswax glue, decorative pins, a little more oil for shine. Then, the crowning moment as the wig is placed on your freshly shaved scalp. If it's crooked, you risk starting a palace-wide existential crisis. If it's straight, congratulations. You're now officially ready to face the world and all the sand that comes with it. And the sand. Oh, the sand. It is relentless, indifferent, and creatively persistent. It sneaks under your wig cap, settles in your kohl, and exfoliates your dignity in places you didn't know you had. No matter how many servants sweep, dab, or curse its existence, by midday you are guaranteed to find at least one grain in your navel and another plotting an escape through your left sandal. The Nile floods, the pyramids erode, but the sand remains. It's history's greatest survivor. Finally, the finishing touches, a dash of perfumed powder, a fresh linen kilt, and enough jewelry to guarantee back pain. You glance in the polished copper mirror, take a breath, careful not to inhale more sand, and try to ignore the fact that your eyebrows look slightly uneven. The servants bow, the cats blink approvingly, and you are, for one brief shining moment, the image of royal perfection. And then you step outside, and the wind picks up, and everything starts all over again. Welcome to Pharaoh life. Ancient Egypt's original beauty influencer, fighting an unwinnable war against the elements and still somehow pulling it off. Sort of. Your day starts with a royal breakfast, stale bread, onions, maybe some honey if the priests are feeling generous. Wash it down with a mug of tepid beer, and if you hear a crunch, just pretend it was a sacred locust and keep chewing. Even pharaohs can't escape fibre. The royal breakfast chamber is a study in grandeur and grit. Tall columns painted with faded lotus flowers, servants bustling about with trays, and sunlight streaming through lattice windows to reveal dust. So much dust. You take your seat at a low table set with glazed pottery and silver spoons. Impressive, until you realize most of the food looks like it could survive an apocalypse. The main attraction is always bread. Not the fluffy, Instagrammable kind, more of a weaponized wheat brick. Ancient Egyptian bread is made from emmer wheat, which contains enough sand and grit to double as a dental exfoliant. There's no crusty sourdough here, just a dense, heavy loaf that, if dropped, could dent a chariot wheel. You break off a chunk, trying not to make eye contact with the family portrait of Osiris looming on the wall, and brace yourself for the world's most committed chew. If you're lucky, the priests have blessed you with a dab of honey or a splash of date syrup. Most days, you're handed an onion and told it's a delicacy, which is technically true if your other option is eating more sand. Sometimes, there's a boiled egg or a wedge of cheese so aged it probably remembers your grandfather's coronation. The cheese has a life of its own and possibly some opinions about tax reform. And then there's the beer. Yes, beer for breakfast. Not the foamy, golden pint you might imagine, but a cloudy, porridge-like brew made from half-fermented barley and whatever floated into the vat overnight. It's warm, sour, and thick enough to chew if you're determined. Even the royal cupbearer pours it with the resigned air of someone who's tasted it before. Children drink it too, because the water is suspicious at best, and nobody wants to start the day with a stomach curse from the Nile. Royal protocol requires that you thank the gods for your meal, preferably without choking on a stray pebble. You murmur your gratitude, glance at the priests to make sure they're paying attention, and then get down to the main event. Eating, while pretending not to notice the beetle that just crawled out of your bread. In ancient Egypt, beetles are sacred, symbolic, and, when necessary, a surprise source of protein. If anyone asks, you totally meant to eat it. Breakfast is a social affair, but only in the sense that you are never alone. Scribes hover in the corners, noting what you eat. Servants flit by, adjusting the drapery and replenishing your cup. At least 3 officials are waiting for you to finish so they can read the day's omens in your leftovers. One rumor is that every time a pharaoh leaves a crust uneaten, a vizier gains a grey hair. Eating as pharaoh is less about nourishment and more about setting an example. You're supposed to appear grateful, stoic, and mildly interested in whatever the priests are chanting. Never mind that you secretly wish for an avocado toast, or at least bread with less bite to it. But appearances matter. So you smile, nod, and eat your way through the morning's carbohydrates like you're starring in an infomercial for ancient dental care. And when you're done, it's off to a quick hand-washing ceremony. Because nothing says divine cleanliness like dunking your fingers in a bowl that hasn't seen soap since the Old Kingdom. A final mouthful of beer to wash down any lingering onions. And you're ready to face the day, stomach rumbling, jaw aching, and dignity mostly intact. Congratulations! You've just survived breakfast, Pharaoh style. It's going to be a long day, and chances are you'll be hungry again by the next festival. Nature calls, but your throne is a slab of limestone with a clay pot beneath. Don't expect privacy. Attendants hover, ready to pass scented cones and pass judgment. And don't ask about plumbing. The Nile is not just for bathing. Being a living god apparently comes with a very mortal digestive system, and nowhere is that more obvious than in the royal toilet. Forget gold-plated luxury or marble flushing fountains. Instead, you're presented with a perfectly utilitarian seat, a block of sun-warmed limestone with a strategically placed hole and a pottery jar beneath it, looking suspiciously like last night's soup pot. You've never checked, and honestly, you'd rather not. To access your royal restroom, you must first traverse a hallway lined with scenes of your own military victories and offerings to the gods. The message is clear. Conquer your enemies and then conquer breakfast. As you approach, a pair of servants part the linen curtain with all the solemnity of opening the gates to the afterlife. The reality on the other side? Slightly less glamorous. There's a faint scent of incense, a dish of dried natron for freshness, and 3 attendants who somehow always know exactly how many figs you ate last night. Privacy is a concept lost to history. The pharaoh is never truly alone, not even when answering nature's call. Attendants stand by, ready to pass scented cones, fanning the air or politely averting their eyes, except when they're not, and then you get a running commentary on the weather, your sandals, and how well the palace cats have been catching mice lately. The only thing less private than the pharaoh's toilet is the palace gossip about who's spent the longest in there this week. As you settle onto the limestone, which is, let's be honest, always either too hot or too cold, you contemplate the ancient Egyptian approach to hygiene. There's no flush, no soft 2-ply papyrus, and certainly no seat warmer unless you count the relentless Egyptian sun. Instead, attendants offer a small basket of reeds or rough linen strips, which are definitely not scented unless you count essence of Nile mud as a scent. You may be a deity, but your posterior will never be the same. Disposal is simple. Once you've finished your royal business, the attendant whisks away the jar with the same reverence usually reserved for relics, and your contribution is added to the palace's collection, destined for a trip to the fields or, on especially unlucky days, a quick dump into a Nile tributary. Yes, that Nile, the one that supplies your drinking water, bathes your sacred animals, and irrigates your crops. Ancient Egypt. The circle of life is also the circle of plumbing. To combat the persistent aromas of palace life, scented cones are pressed into service. These waxy, perfumed lumps are perched atop your head and slowly melt in the heat, releasing clouds of lotus, myrrh, or something that smells suspiciously like wishful thinking. It's less fresh mountain air and more mystical Febreze. You emerge from the toilet, trailing a scent cloud so thick you could be mistaken for a portable temple, offering. But perhaps the worst indignity isn't the lack of privacy or the ever-present risk of slipping on a sand-dusted floor. It's that your most basic bodily function is now part of official palace routine. Scribes keep track of your movements for signs from the gods. If your morning is delayed, a priest will arrive to check your humours and recommend a new diet, a different prayer, or, in extreme cases, a spell to move things along. No one said divinity was dignified, and so you shuffle out of the royal restroom, dignity slightly dented, hair perfumed, and one step closer to appreciating the wonders of modern plumbing. You might be king of the Nile, but when it comes to the throne room, you're still just another human trying to avoid eye contact with the help. Congratulations, O Divine One. Your reign continues, but your porcelain dreams are centuries away. Forget divine mystery. Your first task is a stack of papyrus scrolls requiring your royal scribble, taxes to approve, temples to fund, and endless updates on the latest hippo rampage. If you thought being a god king exempted you from paperwork, think again. Your morning as pharaoh, bringer of Ma'at and eternal ruler of the 2 lands, begins with a not-so-eternal struggle: paperwork. No matter how holy you are, the universe still requires signatures, rubber stamps, well, scarab stamps, and the odd bit of chicken scratch across a heap of papyrus. You're led from breakfast straight into the Hall of Administration, a high-ceilinged room echoing with the whispers of anxious officials. The walls are decorated with images of you smiting enemies and receiving tribute, but the real enemies here are bureaucracy and eye strain. A scribe, chosen for his beautiful handwriting and capacity for relentless optimism, approaches you carrying a basket overflowing with papyrus scrolls. His linen kilt is crisp, his expression is not. "Your Divine Majesty, today's business," he announces, already apologizing with his eyes. One look at the pile, and you briefly consider staging your own disappearance. You take your seat, a surprisingly uncomfortable wooden chair meant to remind you that even a god king has to suffer for the state, and the briefing begins. First up, taxes. There are charts, lists, and not-so-subtle reminders that most of Egypt's wealth is currently tied up in unfinished pyramids, temple endowments, and the royal harem's sandal budget. Your treasurer, an elderly man whose beard contains enough papyrus dust to fertilize the fields, asks whether you want to raise taxes on grain or, this year, just skip straight to "please send more gold." You nod sagely and pretend you know what you're doing. No one must realize you're up all night dreaming about racing chariots, not economics. Next, you're presented with a temple funding request. The priests of Karnak would like an additional 10 oxen, 3 boatloads of incense, and exclusive rights to the annual bread festival. The scribe recites, "You ask what happened to last year's oxen. Sacrificed, O living Horus." Of course they were. You approve the request with a flourish. Then make a mental note never to get on the priest's bad side. They control the afterlife, but also the kingdom's entire incense supply. Now come the animal reports. Apparently, there's been another hippopotamus incident in Middle Egypt. The head of palace security solemnly reads the official summary. 1 noble's garden destroyed, 2 fishing boats capsized, and 1 priest's wig tragically lost at sea. There is no insurance in ancient Egypt. Just apologies, offerings, and the secret hope that the next hippo will move downstream to your rival's estates. The stack of papyrus grows smaller, but the topics only get weirder. One report details an ongoing border dispute with the Nubians. Another warns of a particularly ambitious goose terrorizing the palace kitchens. You are required to pronounce judgment, or at least look like you care. You offer a royal decree, more bread for the Nubian negotiators, and an official title for the goose. Congratulations, you're now the only monarch with a head of domestic fowl. Each scroll is a lesson in ancient HR. There are squabbles over irrigation rights, accusations of papyrus theft in the scriptorium, and a complaint from your own mother about the state of the palace gardens. Apparently, the sacred lotus flowers look tired. You resist the urge to issue a decree banning family feedback. Every so often, an official tries to slip a personal request into the pile. Your cousin's friend's brother would like a position at court. A scribe would appreciate a day off for his cat's birthday. Someone wants permission to invent a new type of beer. You sign, stamp, and hope for the best. By the end of the morning, your hand is cramped, your patience is worn thin, and you've approved enough projects to keep Egypt's economy running and the priesthood plotting for another year. You rise, smile, and tell everyone that Ma'at, the cosmic order, is preserved. And that's when the next stack of papyrus arrives. Welcome to Eternity, Pharaoh, the only place where your afterlife might actually have less paperwork. Pharaoh's outfit of the day? Heavy gold collars, jeweled scepters, and a skirt so tight it doubles as birth control. You're the most powerful human on Earth, and yet you're one stiff breeze away from a royal wardrobe malfunction. As the living Horus, you can't exactly greet your subjects in pajamas, no matter how much you'd like to. Every morning after breakfast, and after you've successfully evaded the palace geese, it's time for the grand ritual of getting dressed. This is not as simple as slipping on a tunic and calling it regal. Instead, it's a group project involving half a dozen attendants a jeweler with opinions, and at least one nervous scribe taking inventory so nothing disappears between fittings. Your wardrobe is legendary and intimidating. Racks of linen kilts in varying degrees of transparency await you, all perfectly starched and less comfortable than a dinner with your in-laws. The basic look. White linen kilt, pleated to within an inch of its life, and a broad collar made of gold, faience, and semi-precious stones. Each piece is designed to make you look imposing, immortal, and only slightly miserable. The collar alone weighs as much as a small dog and leaves you with impressive red marks that, if you're lucky, can be hidden under more jewelry. Getting into your outfit is an exercise in trust and core strength. The kilt is wrapped, pleated, and cinched until you can barely breathe, let alone plot military campaigns. It's held together with a decorative clasp that always looks one strong exhale away from launching itself into the afterlife. Ancient Egyptian fashion, as it turns out, is mostly about appearing divine while secretly wishing you could just wear sweatpants. But no Pharaoh's ensemble is complete without accessories. The wrist cuffs are so ornate and heavy that you risk developing pharaonic wrist, a medical condition known only to those forced to balance 12 gold scarabs while signing temple funding scrolls. Each finger gets its own bejeweled ring, ideally sized for intimidation and not for actual hand movement. By the time you're finished, you look like you robbed a jewelry store, but in the most sacred way possible. And then comes the crown. Your headdress, sometimes a blue war helmet, sometimes the famous neem-striped cloth, sometimes a bizarre combination of snake, vulture, and bonus feathers, signifies your divine right to rule, but also guarantees a stiff neck by lunchtime. The crown is set upon your wig, carefully centered so that the uraeus, the royal cobra ornament, sits poised to strike terror into the hearts of your enemies and possibly into the eyes of any servant standing too close. Weapons and symbols are next. The crook and flail, scepters of authority, and the ever-useful ankh, good for waving at dignitaries or scratching the unreachable itch under your gold collar. You hold them like props in a very intense stage production, while trying to ignore the slow slide of sweat pooling beneath your collar. If anyone asks, it's divine due. Despite the sweat, the discomfort, and the permanent risk of chafing, your appearance is more than vanity. It's a political statement. Each bead and feather is a signal to your subjects and rivals. Here stands a god on earth, untouchable and, at least visually, invincible. Your enemies see the sparkle and the stoic stare, not the elastic marks or the sandal blisters. But with all this grandeur comes a single, terrifying truth: the wind. One ill-timed gust, and your regal kilt turns traitor, threatening to expose more than just your divine right. There are no safety pins in ancient Egypt. Just the hope that your attendants tied those knots tight enough to survive both the elements and the walk to the palace courtyard. So you take a deep breath, square your golden shoulders, and step out before the waiting court. Everyone gasps in awe, not realizing you're one awkward sneeze away from changing the course of fashion history. But you look glorious. You look immortal. And you are definitely, absolutely, almost comfortable. Almost. Your family tree is less a tree and more a tangled bush. Siblings, half-siblings, cousins, sometimes all rolled into one. Family dinners come with a side of intrigue and the lingering suspicion that everyone wants your job, and possibly your wife. If you thought your family reunions were complicated, try being a pharaoh. The royal household in ancient Egypt is a living, breathing drama series with more plot twists than a papyrus scroll. The pharaoh is expected to be the rock at the center of it all, but you're actually more like a referee at a crocodile wrestling match, blindfolded, half-starved, and carrying a torch that might set your own linen kilt on fire. Let's start with siblings. You have brothers, sisters, and special siblings whose parentage is never clearly explained. Some are the children of the Great Wife, others of Secondary Wife Number 3, and a few seem to have shown up during a particularly confusing harvest festival. The line between cousin, half-brother, and strategic political hostage is as thin as the average palace curtain. No wonder everyone looks tense at breakfast. The thing about royal siblings is, they aren't just your brothers and sisters, they're your competition. Pharaohs have a habit of not retiring gracefully. Every relative is technically one bad batch of figs away from the throne. So you watch each other's moves with the paranoia of cats in a room full of rocking chairs. Your younger brother eyes your crown just a little too long. Your older sister, technically also your aunt, offers you extra honey at dinner and smiles just a little too kindly. Suspicious? Always. In the ancient Egyptian court, trust is rarer than rain in the Valley of the Kings. Family dinners are an event. The table is long enough to seat an entire dynasty, but everyone crowds at one end, close enough for whispering and subtle attempts at intimidation. There's always that awkward moment when someone brings up inheritance, or your half-cousin twice removed tries to impress the priests by reciting the Book of the Dead backwards. You listen, you smile, you try not to reach for the ceremonial dagger just yet. Marriage does not help matters. In fact, it often makes them worse. To keep the bloodline pure, royal unions are less about romance and more about complicated math. You might marry your half-sister, your full sister, or your cousin's daughter who is also, thanks to the family tree, technically your niece. Even the gods are confused. Modern matchmaking apps could never handle this level of complexity. Every marriage is also a political alliance, or a powder keg. Wives jockey for status, mothers-in-law plot from behind veils, and the children are all future pharaohs in training, or at least potential pawns in someone else's grand scheme. The palace nursery is less a place of innocence and more a gladiator school, but with more eyeliner. Let's not forget the mothers. The Great Wife, also known as the Queen, wields enormous influence, balancing temple politics, harem management, and the never-ending task of keeping her children alive and, if possible, on the throne. The other wives try to catch your eye at festivals or slip their children into the family portrait at just the right moment. Every lullaby is a potential campaign speech. Family gossip is its own currency. News of who's plotting what, who sneezed during a sacred rite, and who left the goat gate open during the solstice spreads through the palace faster than a Nile flood. Servants know better than to take sides. Cats, on the other hand, are loyal to no one. In the end, being pharaoh isn't just about ruling a kingdom. It's about navigating a dinner table where half the guests want your blessing and the other half want your job. And if you ever get too comfortable, remember, someone is always plotting, whispering, or smiling just a little too much at your wife. Congratulations, O Divine One. You survived another meal with the world's most ambitious family. The crown may be heavy, but the real burden is remembering everyone's name at the next wedding. The gods need constant attention, and as their representative, so do you. Temple visits involve incense, chanting, and pretending to enjoy offerings that look suspiciously like last night's leftovers. The priests expect divine humility. You mostly deliver divine eye rolls. The first rule of being pharaoh: you are the cosmic middle manager between humanity and a staff meeting's worth of gods with wildly different job descriptions. Your morning isn't complete without a stop at the main temple, a sprawling, echoing palace within a palace where every statue is staring just a little too judgmentally. You enter in full regalia, flanked by officials who look like they'd rather be at breakfast, and priests who look like they haven't slept since the last lunar eclipse. The air inside the temple is thick with incense. Not the gentle kind you might light at home, but an all-consuming smog of frankincense, myrrh, and something mysterious that leaves your eyes watering and your nostrils doubting their life choices. It's tradition. And if the gods don't wake up from the chanting, the pharaoh certainly will. Your daily role in these ceremonies is carefully choreographed. Stand on the leopard skin mat. Accept the lotus flower. Nod as the high priest recites a prayer that's longer than most funerals. When you think he's finished, surprise, he's only on stanza 2. Meanwhile, acolytes parade past, carrying platters stacked high with food offerings, bread, roast goose, fruit, and something that might once have been fish. You're supposed to present these to the gods, but rumor has it most of the sacred leftovers circle back to the priest's own kitchens by nightfall, divine recycling at its finest. As Pharaoh, your official face is carved in stone, but your inner monologue is pure sarcasm. You try to look awestruck as the priests burn incense in elaborate patterns, but after the third, "Hail to you, Lord of the Two Lands, smiter of sandflies," even your divinity starts to daydream. The temple walls are covered in scenes of your glorious offerings. In reality, your biggest offering is the patience to endure another 2 hours of ceremonial chanting before your next meal. Priests, of course, are everywhere. Dressed in spotless white linen, heads shaven, hands perpetually hovering over sacred objects, they guard the temple's secrets like cats guard a sunbeam. Their main job? To keep the gods happy, the rituals endless, and your schedule packed. If you miss a ceremony or mispronounce a sacred word, expect a week of bad omens and disapproving glances at court. Being a living god means never getting a day off, not even for your own birthday. Occasionally, a new god arrives on the scene, some crocodile-headed local deity with a catchy festival and, of course, fresh rounds of fundraising. The priests introduce you to these celestial newcomers with the same enthusiasm modern people reserve for new phone apps. Smile, bless, approve funding, repeat. You're less a king, more a full-time event sponsor with eyeliner and a fancy hat. If all goes well, the priests will conclude the ceremony with a final blessing. A splash of sacred water and a drizzle of perfumed oil on your hands, leaving you sticky and smelling faintly of riverbank. On high feast days, there's a parade around the temple complex, where you're required to wave to the adoring crowds and not drop the golden scepter. The people cheer, the priests chant, and somewhere in the back row, someone inevitably faints from the combined effects of the sun and all that incense. By the time you return to the palace, you've been blessed, anointed, sung at, and paraded like a divine mascot. You wipe off the excess oil, shake sand out of your sandals, and prepare for the rest of your day. The gods are satisfied, the priests are appeased, and most importantly, you managed not to sneeze on the sacred altar. Congratulations, you have officially survived another round of worship. The gods may be eternal, but your attention span isn't. And neither is your patience for offerings that look suspiciously like yesterday's leftovers. Another day, another 1,000 laborers hauling limestone in the sun. Supervising pyramid construction sounds impressive, but it's mostly micromanagement and the world's longest punch list. Spoiler: your tomb will never be finished on schedule. As Pharaoh, you'd think building a pyramid would be a matter of snapping your bejeweled fingers and letting the magic happen. In reality, you are less a living god and more the world's most exhausted site supervisor, clipboard in one hand and existential dread in the other. Every pharaoh wants their tomb to outshine the last guys, but no one mentions the endless supply of problems, petitions, and sand. So much sand. Construction starts early, because the midday sun has a personal vendetta against anything with a pulse. You're up before breakfast, reviewing the latest project update. The overseer greets you with a scroll detailing the current progress, which usually means 1. One more ramp collapsed, 2. 3 oxen are missing, and 3. The quarrymen are threatening to unionize if the beer ration isn't increased. You're living proof that management is the same, no matter the century. The labor force itself is a chaotic mix of skilled masons, conscripted farmers, and a rotating cast of motivated volunteers, also known as people who lost at dice. Their loyalty is measured in loaves of bread, pints of beer, and not having to carry the granite blocks for the obelisk. Morale is a fragile thing. If the bread is too stale or the beer is too warm, expect to hear about it. Loudly, your Grand Vizier insists the pyramid will be the biggest yet. A monument to eternity. But eternity has a way of turning up late. Every block has to be quarried, dragged, shaped, and set just so. That's not counting the time lost to workers taking sacred breaks, which seem to coincide suspiciously with the arrival of fresh dates or rumors of crocodiles in the canal. Supervising construction is a lesson in micromanagement. For every grand vision, gleaming white, limestone casing, hidden chambers, perfectly aligned star shafts, there's a crisis involving broken tools, missing chisels, or someone dropping a statue's nose. You spend more time than you'd like, answering questions like, does the Sphinx really need 2 eyes? And what if we painted the pyramid blue? Most of your job is nodding, pretending you understand the architect's frantic gestures, and telling everyone to just follow the plan. You walk the site in a cloud of dust, trailed by scribes making notes, priests making blessings, and relatives making helpful suggestions about which hieroglyphs will look best on the finished product. Someone's always carving your name into the foundation, just in case you forget whose tomb this is supposed to be. The artisans request more gold leaf. The guards complain about unsanctioned graffiti. The foreman asks if you'd like the burial chamber closer to the entrance for convenience. No one laughs. Progress is measured not in days, but in disasters averted. On a good day, the scaffolding holds, no one gets crushed, and only a small portion of the wall collapses. On a bad day, a shipment of stone sinks in the Nile, or you discover that 1,000 workmen have been carving elaborate pictures of ducks instead of following the blueprints. You can either shout, cry, or accept that the afterlife will have to wait another decade. And despite the constant setbacks, delays, and mysterious missing statues, the work never really stops. Every pharaoh wants their tomb finished before they die. None of them ever do. By the time you're gone, your successors will still be fixing cracks and replacing stolen grave goods. If you're lucky, future archaeologists might dig it all up and wonder what you were thinking. So you sigh, dust off your sandals, and sign yet another approval scroll, knowing full well that your pyramid is just another unfinished project in the world's most ambitious game of who had it worse. Welcome to eternal construction. Pharaoh, may your patience outlast your pyramid. Whether it's Nubian rebels or the neighbor who keeps stealing your sacred cattle, your calendar is full of smite the enemy appointments. Royal rage must be delivered with style, ideally while holding a crook and flail and not tripping over your sandals. Being a pharaoh isn't all gold and eyeliner. Sometimes it's about managing an ever-growing list of rivals, rebels, and neighbors who interpret divine boundaries as more of a suggestion than a law. There's always someone pushing the limits, border raiders, ambitious relatives, and most notoriously, the family downriver who keeps letting their goats graze on your royal barley fields. Every day, your schedule is packed tighter than your ceremonial kilt. Parade at dawn, diplomatic envoy at 9, urgent enemy, smiting by noon, and a lunch break if you're lucky. Let's be honest, smiting is an ancient Egyptian pastime. The word is practically etched into every wall. Your artisans never tire of carving grand murals of you raising a mace over a crowd of tiny, pleading enemies, their names carefully written for posterity and for the entertainment of future archaeologists. It's all very symbolic, of course. In reality, you haven't actually hit anyone with a mace in ages. Royal wrath these days is more paperwork and less actual whacking, but the crowd loves a good performance. Diplomacy, when you attempt it, is equally theatrical. You receive envoys from foreign lands, Nubians, Libyans, Hittites, each arriving with gifts and elaborate apologies. Sometimes it's gold, sometimes it's a basket of dates, and sometimes it's their own cousin, offered up as a hostage/very expensive house guest. The palace scribes record every awkward handshake and every poorly translated insult. Nothing says international friendship like a meeting where everyone pretends not to notice the crocodile in the corner. Of course, not every problem can be solved with stern looks and passive-aggressive stares across the throne room. Sometimes, you really do need to smite someone. This usually means leading a grand procession out of the palace, holding your crook and flail in the approved menacing fashion. The court artists line up to sketch you mid-stride, jaw clenched in that special way that says, "I'm both divine and mildly annoyed." You mount your chariot with as much dignity as you can muster, ignoring the fact that the left wheel is squeaky and your helmet is definitely on backwards. Battle, when it comes, is a confusing mix of bravado and logistics. Soldiers line up, priests wave incense, and the court musicians bang drums at the precise moment your sandals start to slip off. Your generals argue about which direction is north, while the enemy is already halfway across the river, probably stealing your cattle again. There's a lot of shouting, some impressive dust clouds, and the eventual realization that smiting mostly involves yelling louder than the other guy and hoping your enemies are easily startled. But the true art of pharaonic smiting isn't brute force, it's showmanship. Every enemy crushed is immortalized in stone. You, striking down chaos and disorder, preferably while looking directly into the middle distance like you're posing for a particularly dramatic coin. Scribes will add poetic descriptions of your thunderous rage and unstoppable right arm, glossing over the part where you tripped over your own crook and had to pause for a sandal adjustment. Occasionally, your enemies send envoys begging for mercy. This is your cue to deliver a speech about order, justice, and the price of stealing royal livestock. You give them gifts, promise peace, and then ask the palace cook to please stop making victory stew. No one wants to know what's in it. When all is said and done, your enemies are mostly subdued, your cattle are mostly accounted for, and your sandals are still not entirely secure. You return to the palace to a hero's welcome and another round of mural posing for the artisans. As always, it's good to be the pharaoh. Even if half your job is just yelling louder than everyone else and hoping your wig stays on straight. And tomorrow, there'll be new enemies, new speeches, and probably another missing cow. Eternity, after all, never takes a day off. Dozens of wives, hundreds of children, and exactly zero peace and quiet. The harem is a never-ending source of gossip, alliances, and creative poisonings. If you thought dating apps were chaotic, try running a kingdom where every relationship is a potential coup. Step inside the royal harem, and you might wish you'd brought a map, a peace treaty, and several extra taster slaves. The harem is less a romantic retreat and more an ancient version of a reality show, part matchmaking, part political hostage situation, and all chaos, all the time. The first thing you notice is the noise, laughter, arguments, music, and, somewhere in the background, the unmistakable sound of someone plotting your downfall over a game of Senate. Let's get the numbers straight. As pharaoh, you have one official great wife, the queen, high priestess of the palace, and, unofficially, head of all gossip operations. Then come the secondary wives, a parade of foreign princesses sent as diplomatic gifts and local nobles' daughters, each one with her own entourage, ambitions, and recipe for herbal digestives that may or may not be actual poison. Add to that a crowd of royal concubines and, eventually, a population of royal offspring that rivals the Nile's annual fish count. Managing the harem is a logistical challenge fit for the gods. Each woman expects attention, gifts, and, most importantly, status. Every day, you're expected to distribute jewelry, dates, compliments, and the occasional papyrus love note. It's like speed dating, except if you forget an anniversary. The penalty is less awkward silence and more international incident. Jealousy flares up with the sunrise. If you spend too much time with the princess from Nubia, the daughters of Upper Egypt start making pointed remarks at dinner. If you skip a poetry reading, expect icy stares and suspiciously cold beer at the next festival. Of course, alliances form within the harem. Some women are true friends, banding together to outmaneuver rivals, but most are experts in the subtle arts of sabotage and passive-aggressive hymn writing. Everyone wants their son or daughter to rise in the succession ranks, and every favor you grant is a tiny battle in a never-ending war for influence. Even the servants pick sides. If you ever wonder why your favorite sandals disappeared, ask which wife you forgot to visit last week. Then there's the children. So many children. Royal tutors run lessons in history, etiquette, and how not to look too eager in front of the high priests. Each child is a potential pawn in the Game of Thrones, with ambitious mothers whispering in their ears about destiny and inheritance. Half of your official duties involve refereeing playground squabbles before they turn into minor palace coups. You learn to keep the physicians on speed dial, just in case tummy ache is actually code for Someone tried to slip extra herbs into my figs. With so many strong personalities under one gilded roof, drama is never in short supply. Rumours fly faster than scarab beetles. Who said what? Who looked at whom? Who wore the wrong amulet to the harvest feast? The palace cats, sensing the tension, tend to hide in the laundry piles until things settle down, which is almost never. Security in the harem is serious business. Guards patrol the corridors, not just to keep outsiders away, but to prevent sudden midnight escapades or, worse, late-night gossip sessions that could topple a dynasty. Occasionally, a rival wife is found trying to bribe a servant or slip an extra blessing into someone else's wine. It's never dull, and it's never safe to eat the last pastry on the plate. You, the mighty Pharaoh, might be master of the two lands, but within the harem, you're just another player in the world's most high-stakes soap opera. When the palace grows quiet and the sun sets over the Nile, you retreat to your private quarters, alone for once, reminding yourself that ruling a kingdom is easy. It's keeping the harem happy that really tests your divine patience. And if you survive another week, congratulations. You've achieved what most men only dream of: legendary status and a permanent headache. You must publicly adore cats, but also act impressed when someone gifts you a mummified baboon. The palace menagerie is more dangerous than it looks, and the geese are plotting something. Again, as Pharaoh, you're not just king of the humans. You are, according to several thousand years of sacred tradition and at least 6 priests with elaborate headdresses, responsible for the well-being and egos of every sacred animal in the kingdom. Ancient Egypt is a land where gods routinely take the shape of jackals, ibises, crocodiles, and cats. Especially cats. If you're allergic, you keep it to yourself and hope Ra has invented antihistamines. Let's start with cats. They rule the palace as surely as you do, maybe more so. Cats are not pets. They are divine, semi-omniscient, and perfectly aware that if anything happens to them, your afterlife insurance is void. You scratch a cat behind the ears in public, everyone applauds. You trip over a cat in private, the servants quietly light extra incense. The cats, for their part, lounge in the sun, judge your ceremonial speeches, and occasionally bat at the sacred scepters when they get bored. At least once a week, a delegation of priests brings you a new kitten chosen by Bastet herself. You pretend to look surprised. The kitten pretends it doesn't already own the palace. Then there's the crocodiles, terrifying, worshipped, and occasionally found in places you wish they weren't. The Temple of Sobek maintains its own watery lair, and every so often, a blessed croc is sent to the palace for you to admire. The handlers assure you he's mostly docile. You nod, keep your distance, and try not to make any sudden movements. Once, a priest tried to impress you by feeding the crocodile from his own hand. The hand survived. The priest's dignity, less so. Geese, meanwhile, are the real power behind the scenes. They waddle through the palace courtyards like they pay the rent, hissing at servants, stealing bread, and holding nightly meetings in the reeds. You once suggested an offering of roast goose to appease the gods, and the entire kitchen staff staged a polite mutiny. The geese know things. The geese remember. They have eyes everywhere. And then come the gifts. Every official, noble, and ambassador tries to win favor with a sacred animal. Baskets of live ibis, a monkey with ceremonial eyeliner, even the occasional mummified baboon, carefully wrapped and labeled with 3 blessings and a passive-aggressive note about long life. You accept each animal with an expression of royal delight, wondering where you'll fit another falcon in the aviary. The court recorders jot down every arrival. The palace animal keepers groan and rearrange the seating chart. If the afterlife involves cleaning up after sacred animals, you're already halfway there. Even the smallest critters have their role. Scarab beetles are a symbol of rebirth and good luck. You smile graciously as a priest hands you a box full of lively blessings, then hand the box off to a trusted advisor the moment the priest's back is turned. Mice are tolerated, as long as they're eaten by the cats. Dogs serve as hunting companions and official palace greeters, but woe to anyone who forgets to bow to Anubis statues in the hallway. It's not all sunshine and sacred fur, though. Sometimes animals misbehave. A sacred ram once ate the high priest's favorite sandals. The baboon escaped its enclosure and spent an afternoon composing divine graffiti on the palace walls. You are summoned to resolve every dispute, diplomat, judge, and zookeeper rolled into one. So you learn to deliver royal praise to every animal, divine or otherwise, while quietly avoiding the crocodile's stare and keeping your sandals away from the goats. Your kingdom is wild, your palace is wilder, and the geese are, frankly, out of control. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You may be the ruler of Egypt, but when it comes to palace politics, the animals are definitely in charge. Lunch depends on the Nile's mood and the local plague status. On a good day, it's roast goose and figs. On a bad day, it's lentil stew and hope. Food poisoning is just part of the royal experience. As midday approaches, your stomach reminds you that divine status doesn't include immunity to hunger pangs. The palace kitchens are a flurry of activity, with servants racing between simmering clay pots and elaborate platters, stacked with enough greenery to feed a small herd of sacred cattle. The head cook, a genius and a tyrant in equal measure, has a direct line to the gods, or at least claims he does whenever the bread is burnt. If the Nile has been generous and the priests have been behaving themselves, lunch can be a spectacle. A parade of dishes marches forth: roast goose, shiny, skinned and swimming in fat, baskets of fresh figs and dates, bowls of honeyed nuts, even the occasional slab of beef or fish, spiced and glistening under the relentless Egyptian sun. Musicians might play, dancers might sway, and you, as Pharaoh, must act as if every bite is the best thing you've ever tasted, even if you just chipped a tooth on a pomegranate seed. But the Nile is fickle. Sometimes it overflows, bringing wealth and abundance. Other times it sulks, delivering famine, mosquitoes, or, on especially unlucky years, a biblical-grade frog infestation. When the river misbehaves, or the court is suffering from one of its regularly scheduled plagues, lunch becomes an exercise in lowered expectations. Today's menu: watery lentil stew, stale bread, and an unidentifiable green paste that you hope is supposed to taste that way. No one mentions the last time someone ate the special cheese and didn't immediately regret it. Food safety is optimistic. Royal tasters are employed to sample every dish before it reaches your table, but even the bravest among them have been known to fake a stomachache at the sight of undercooked carp. Sometimes the kitchen staff gets creative, inventing new dishes out of desperation. Spiced lotus root, blessed leeks, or on particularly lean days, festival porridge, which is exactly as exciting as it sounds. If you're lucky, there's still wine to wash it all down, preferably before anyone brings up the mortality rate from last week's fish stew. Dining isn't a solo affair. Your lunchroom is crowded with nobles, scribes, priests, and at least one family member pretending not to judge your table manners. Protocol dictates that you make polite conversation about the weather, hot, the crops, also hot, and the local plague, suspiciously quiet this week. Meanwhile, everyone keeps a careful eye on the food, both to see what you're eating and to make sure no one tries to accidentally swap their bowl with yours. The harem, of course, is an entire subplot. Alliances are made and broken over shared dates, and rumours swirl about which wife is secretly feeding her rivals digestive aids. Palace cats roam under the table, ready to pounce on anything that hits the floor. They are both respected and feared, especially since everyone remembers what happened to the last servant who tried to shoo a sacred cat away from the cheese plate. The geese, thankfully, are banished outside during meal times, after the infamous incident of the Great Lentil Spill, a story recounted at every festival, mostly as a warning. And then there are the inevitable interruptions. An urgent message from the priests about an ominous cloud, a report of rebellious workers at the pyramid, or, most delightfully, a spontaneous poem recited by your cousin about the beauty of boiled onions. You listen, you smile, and you chew carefully, hoping whatever you just ate wasn't supposed to move. By the end of lunch, you're either pleasantly full, mildly poisoned, or quietly contemplating a bread-based diet for the rest of your reign. Lunch, like life on the Nile, is always unpredictable, and that, apparently, is the true flavor of royalty. Congratulations, you survived another royal meal. At least until dinner. What do you do for fun? Senate board games, river fishing, or composing bad poetry about how beautiful the Nile is. Try to look interested as a courtier recites another 300-line epic about your sandals. After lunch, when the Egyptian sun turns the palace walls into a slow-cooking oven, the entire court shifts into leisure mode, or at least what passes for leisure in a place where fun is usually just another word for obligation. As Pharaoh, your free time is anything but free, carefully managed by a schedule-obsessed scribe and the ever-watchful eye of the Palace Social Committee, also known as your mother. The first, and perhaps most competitive pastime, is Senate. Imagine the world's oldest board game, a mix between chess, luck, and the subtle art of looking unimpressed while you're losing. The royal version involves lavishly decorated boards and pieces made of ivory and lapis lazuli, which is impressive until you realize no one really understands the rules. Each courtier claims to have learned Senate from their grandfather, the vizier, but the only consistent strategy is arguing about the score until someone offers snacks. You, as Pharaoh, are expected to win gracefully, lose charismatically, and always look like you're having the time of your life, even as your great-uncle tries to distract you with a monologue about the mystical power of the number 7. If you need a break from board games, there's always hunting. This is less wilderness adventure and more royal parade through the reeds. You mount your chariot in full regalia, accompanied by nobles, priests, and enough servants to form their own sports league. The quarry ranges from waterfowl to wild antelope, but the real challenge is making sure no one accidentally spears a sacred ibis or gets stuck in the mud. You're presented with the finest bows, but everyone knows the real sport is in the post-hunt banquet, where tales of your bravery in single-handedly fending off a crocodile grow with every round of beer. If you actually catch something, congratulations, you're a hero. If not, the kitchen staff has a backup goose on standby and strict instructions never to mention it. Fishing is a more peaceful diversion, assuming you don't mind sharing the riverbank with half the court, at least 3 scribes, and a pair of bored palace cats. Royal fishing rods are carved with hieroglyphs for luck, though the only thing biting today seems to be the mosquitoes. You try to look contemplative, staring out at the shimmering water, while your ministers discuss tax reforms in whispers behind you. If you manage to catch a fish, a small crowd gathers to applaud and immediately offer opinions on the best way to cook it. This is less leisure and more public performance with occasional snacks. For those seeking a gentler afternoon, poetry readings are the order of the day. This is where ambitious courtiers really shine. Or, depending on your patience, spectacularly crash and burn. You are regularly serenaded with odes to the Nile, your sandals, your divine profile at sunset, and, once, a surprisingly detailed description of your royal left eyebrow. Etiquette dictates that you look deeply moved, perhaps even a little teary-eyed, while silently planning your escape route. If a poem is particularly dreadful, you can always declare it so profound it defies comprehension, which is ancient Egyptian for please stop. Sometimes the palace musicians put on a show, plucking lyres and banging drums with wild abandon. The cats scatter, the geese try to harmonize, and your youngest sibling takes the opportunity to invent new dance moves that will probably be banned by sundown. You, the all-powerful Pharaoh, sit in your gilded chair and try not to yawn too openly. And as the afternoon fades and the shadow of your latest pyramid creeps across the lawn, you reflect on how even leisure here is laced with ceremony, competition, and the subtle terror of bad poetry. But you endure it all, because in ancient Egypt, relaxation is just another opportunity to prove you're the most patient being in the kingdom. Congratulations, you made it through another round of fun. Only a few more centuries to go. Smile for the crowds. Whether you're inaugurating a new canal or just waving from a barge, the people expect a living god to look radiant, even if your allergies are acting up and your kilt is riding dangerously high. As Pharaoh, your day is peppered with public appearances, and each one is a masterclass in looking regal while suppressing the urge to sneeze. You'd think that after a lifetime of being paraded about as the divine ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, you'd be used to it. But nothing truly prepares you for the moment when the palace steward bursts in and announces, "O Great One, it is time to bless the new papyrus market and possibly shake hands with 200 strangers." Preparation for a public event starts hours in advance. You are helped into your most impressive collar, weighted down with enough gold and jewels to anchor a boat. Your hair, or more likely your wig, is teased, fluffed, and glued into submission. Attendants dab scented oils under your arms and discreetly apply kohl around your eyes, because nothing says immortal God like running eyeliner at noon. They finish by adjusting your ceremonial kilt, which, despite the best intentions of the royal tailor, is always a half-inch too tight and rides up at the worst possible moment. Once you're fully adorned, it's off to the waiting chariot, barge, or, on especially hot days, your portable throne, which is just a fancy way of saying carried around by 4 very exhausted-looking noblemen. You are followed by a small army of priests, bodyguards, scribes, musicians, and at least 3 relatives who hope to be seen in your divine orbit. Outside, the crowds line the streets and riverbanks, waving palm fronds, throwing flowers, and hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal profile. You try to smile and look omnipotent, all while blinking through the pollen and desperately wishing someone had invented antihistamines. The ceremonies themselves are long and, let's be honest, a little repetitive. There's the speech, always in high poetic style, about the greatness of Egypt, the blessings of the Nile, and your personal commitment to order, justice, and not letting the canal dry up this year. There's the cutting of a ribbon or the smashing of a ceremonial clay pot, symbolizing the defeat of chaos, followed by polite applause and a few heartfelt cries of life, prosperity, health from the crowd. Every appearance is an exercise in multitasking. You wave with one hand, accept offerings of bread and beer with the other, and somehow keep your headdress from slipping. You know from experience that one misplaced gust of wind can transform a regal moment into an anecdote for generations, like the time your crown landed in the canal and was promptly rescued by a very enthusiastic priest. The people cheered, the priest's status soared, and you developed a sudden interest in headgear that ties under the chin. Sometimes you are paraded down the Nile itself, reclining on a gilded barge as musicians play and dancers twirl in the scorching sun. You're expected to look as fresh as a lotus flower, even as the mosquitoes attack with the enthusiasm of divine vengeance. Every so often, you pass a group of geese who glare at you with open suspicion, as if they know you approved the royal menu last week. Throughout it all, you are watched by scribes, by priests, by every child perched on a parent's shoulders. You're required to radiate calm, benevolence, and a subtle reminder that, despite the sweat and awkward kilt, you are the chosen of the gods. If you happen to yawn or scratch, expect the gossip to reach the palace before you do. And when the trumpets sound the end of the day's festivities, you bow gracefully, retreat to your waiting barge, and collapse in a heap of linen, gold, and pollen. The people are happy, the priests are satisfied, and you have survived another parade, only slightly sunburned, fully chafed, and ready for a nap worthy of Ra himself. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You looked radiant, even with that piece of papyrus stuck to your sandal. Let's talk about what happens when you eat like a god, but your intestines disagree. Ancient Egyptian medicine has a cure for everything, usually involving honey, crocodile dung, or loud chanting. Nothing says royalty like a public bout of indigestion. As Pharaoh, you are blessed, or perhaps cursed, with access to the most elaborate banquets the Nile Valley has to offer. Every meal is a parade of possibilities: roast goose, honey cakes, spiced fish, sweet beer, and fruits picked at the perfect moment of ripeness, or sometimes several moments after. There are figs so juicy they stain your kilt, and onions so pungent you can taste them in next Tuesday's prayers. And because you're semi-divine, every bite is supposed to be an offering to the gods, except the gods, mercifully, don't have digestive tracts. The truth? All that luxury comes with a side of risk. You start strong, filling your plate with the best the kitchens can muster. But you know deep down, there's a 50-50 chance you'll be sending for the palace physician before sunset. Ancient Egypt is a world before refrigeration, after all, and sometimes the sacred goose was a little too enthusiastic about aging on the pantry shelf. There's only so much incense can cover up. Symptoms come on suddenly. A rumbling stomach, a bead of sweat, an urge to run to the royal restroom faster than a scribe chasing a dropped scroll. Unfortunately, you're never alone. If indigestion strikes during a state banquet, the whole room will know. Courtiers exchange glances. Musicians play a little louder. Somewhere, a priest starts prepping a blessing just in case you don't make it. Enter the court physician, an expert in the sacred arts of diagnosis, distraction, and optimistic guesswork. Treatments begin with the classics: honey for sweetness, herbs for mystery, and, on the more adventurous days, a dash of ground crocodile dung. Yes, actual crocodile dung. The prevailing medical wisdom is that if it's good enough for Sobek, it's good enough for your insides. The taste is indescribable, the aftertaste eternal. You swallow, smile bravely, and try not to let your discomfort show in the official portrait being painted behind you. Sometimes, if your stomach's truly in revolt, the physician will prescribe ritual chanting. This involves half the palace staff standing around your bed, chanting spells and wafting incense while you try to decide if the room is spinning because of the power of Ra or just a bad oyster. The spells don't always work, but they do provide excellent cover for any undignified noises escaping from beneath your royal linen. If herbal remedies and spiritual support fail, there's always a trip to the Temple of Imhotep, Egypt's patron of medicine. Here you'll find priests eager to test the latest cures: lotus root poultices, a ritual purification bath, which is basically just very public bathing with extra spectators, or the application of sacred mud to various pressure points. You try to look grateful, but mostly you're plotting ways to quietly invent modern antacid tablets several millennia early. Meanwhile, the palace rumour mill goes into overdrive. Was it the figs, the beer, the suspicious cheese from the Nubian ambassador? The scribes take careful notes, hoping to avoid a repeat performance at tomorrow's feast. Even the palace cats look sympathetic, curling up near your feet as you gingerly sip watered wine and swear off onions again. By the next morning, you're probably back on your feet, if not exactly eager for the breakfast bread. Your court congratulates you for your divine resilience, and the kitchen staff promises to taste everything personally, a phrase that, by now, is less reassurance and more a polite way of saying good luck. O king, congratulations, you survived another royal meal, another round of remedies, and another lesson in humility. No matter how grand the title, the digestive tract remains eternally democratic. Even the gods would envy your determination if they had to eat at your table. The sun sets, and the palace comes alive with music, dancers, and enough wine to fill a small canal. The only thing more dangerous than court politics is the after-dinner dancing. No one parties like an ancient Egyptian, because no one can leave early. When darkness falls on the Nile, the palace transforms. The walls flicker with torchlight, and the air is thick with the scent of lotus oil and roasted meat. Servants scurry by with baskets of dates and glazed jugs of wine, preparing for another legendary banquet. You, the pharaoh, are seated at the head of a table so long it disappears into the shadows, surrounded by nobles who may or may not remember whose side they're on by morning. Banquets in ancient Egypt are less formal dinner and more eternal festival. The food comes in waves: platters of honey cakes, roast goose, grilled fish, and fruit so ripe it almost escapes the bowl. The wine flows steadily, poured by servants trained to refill your cup the moment you look even slightly thirsty. Etiquette demands that you sample everything and praise every dish, even the ones that clearly started fermenting in the Old Kingdom. Music is the soul of the party. Lyres, lutes, drums, and clappers join the chorus of cheerful chaos. The palace musicians, paid by the hour and by the decibel, do their best to drown out the inevitable whispers of intrigue from the noble guests. Dancers twirl and leap across polished tiles, draped in linen and golden jewelry, performing routines that range from mesmerizing to just slightly hazardous. Every now and then, an ambitious courtier attempts to join the dancers, sometimes to impress you, sometimes just to impress themselves. The results are mixed and occasionally require a priestly intervention. Drinking games are practically a requirement. The rules are as mysterious as the afterlife, but everyone seems to agree that the loser must recite a poem, propose a toast, or accept a harmless prank, like being forced to wear the royal vulture crown for the rest of the night. If you, as Pharaoh, are unlucky enough to lose, the court erupts in carefully disguised delight. You wear your new accessory with divine good humor, secretly plotting your revenge for the next banquet. Inevitably, someone, usually a second cousin or aspiring poet, demands a storytelling contest. Tales of heroic ancestors, gods, monsters, and embarrassing childhood incidents are all fair game. You sit back and listen, pretending not to notice as your cup is refilled for the 6th or 7th time. With each story, the laughter grows louder and the dancing grows bolder. Even the palace cats get into the spirit, darting between dancers' ankles and occasionally nabbing a stray piece of roasted fish. There's always a moment in the night when things begin to unravel. The musicians start playing faster. The dancing moves from elegant to enthusiastic. A nobleman challenges you to a chariot race around the garden, and you gently remind him that last time, someone lost a sandal and their dignity in the reflecting pool. The wine flows, the conversations swirl, and the world outside the palace disappears. But there's a cost to all this revelry. As the party lurches into the early hours, a few guests inevitably vanish under the table, victims of too much honey wine and not enough bread. The palace physician patrols discreetly, armed with a basket of herbal remedies for the worst offenders. The bravest, or least wise, among your court attempt to keep dancing, fueled by stubborn pride and the lingering hope that you might promote them for sheer endurance. By the time you slip away, the palace is still thumping with life. Your head is light, your feet are sore, and your ears are ringing with music and laughter. As you retire, the festivities will continue without you. No one dares call an end to a royal banquet until sunrise or collapse, whichever comes first. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You've survived another night at the world's most exclusive and exhausting party. And in Egypt, the party is always just beginning again. Bathing is both ritual and recreation, involving scented oils, palm frond fans, and at least 3 servants you've never bothered to name. Just don't drop your amulet in the tub. It's probably cursed. In a land where the sun scorches everything it touches and sand infiltrates every layer of linen, royal baths are not just a luxury, they are survival, spiritual renewal, and, occasionally, ancient Egypt's answer to group therapy. Your daily dip isn't just about removing dust and divine BO. It's a spectacle, a ceremony, and a rare chance to pretend you're not constantly one step away from being mummified by the desert air. The palace bathhouse is a cool, echoing chamber lined with polished stone and perfumed by incense and lotus blossoms. A small, private pool is filled with water that, in theory, comes directly from the Nile, filtered through more linen than your average wardrobe. In practice, it's a gamble. Some days it's crystal clear. Other days it has a mysterious green tint and an aroma that whispers, "Extra blessing," just in case. You step into the water with the cautious grace of a ruler who's seen what lurks beneath the surface of the sacred river. Your bath is never a solitary experience. 3, sometimes 4, attendants hover at the edges, ready with trays of scented oils and stacks of fresh linen towels. They fan you with palm fronds, add handfuls of aromatic herbs to the water, and occasionally offer helpful advice on which goddess to thank for extra bubbles. The attendants have been at this so long, they know your favorite oil blend, myrrh, a hint of juniper, and whatever keeps the palace cats at bay, and can time a hair wash to the exact length of your favorite hymn. Cleanliness is a ritual in itself. Before you even step into the bath, a priest mutters a quick blessing over your head. 1 part spiritual protection, 2 parts insurance against slip-and-fall lawsuits in the afterlife. As you bathe, servants scrub your arms and legs with exfoliating sand or pumice stones, a technique equal parts relaxing and, "Why is my skin on fire?" They pour pitchers of warm water over your shoulders, careful not to drench the sacred amulet that absolutely cannot, under any circumstances, be allowed to touch water. The one time you dropped it, 3 priests spent the afternoon debating whether you needed an exorcism or just a new chain. Soap, as you know, it doesn't exist. Instead, you're scrubbed with a paste of clay, natron, and crushed lotus petals. It leaves you smelling like a perfume merchant's dream, but feeling like you've been gently sandpapered by the gods. After the scrub, it's time for oiling. Servants rub your skin with fragrant oils to seal in the moisture and, more importantly, to make you shine during evening banquets. Nothing says living God like being able to blind your enemies with your elbows. Bathing is social too. Some days, you invite a few favoured nobles or family members for a soak and gossip session. Everyone carefully pretending not to notice the geese peeking through the doorway or the cat perched on the edge, contemplating a leap. These bathhouse conversations cover everything from crop reports to harem drama to the latest palace poetry. If you're very lucky, someone will bring a lute, and you'll all be serenaded by songs about the Nile's eternal beauty, or, more likely, about your cousin's hair. By the end, you emerge from the bath feeling less like a sun-baked relic and more like a slightly oily, divinely refreshed version of yourself. The priests declare you purified. The servants bundle you in linen. The cats, unimpressed as ever, await the next meal. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You've survived another royal cleansing. Just watch your step on the way out. The tiles are slippery, and nobody wants to see a living god take a tumble before bedtime. Why date the neighbour when you can marry your half-sister? Royal blood must stay pure, even if it means your family tree is more of a decorative shrub. Modern awkwardness, ancient tradition. Welcome to the Royal Romance Department, where the heart wants what the court genealogist approves. As Pharaoh, your love life is less swept away by passion and more swept into an arranged marriage with your closest available relative. It's not that you don't have choices. There are cousins, half-siblings, and the occasional diplomatic princess. But the real matchmaking is done with an eye on the throne, not on personal chemistry. From childhood, you're reminded that royal blood is sacred. This is less a compliment and more a stern warning. No falling for the baker's daughter or the handsome scribe. The fate of Egypt, you are told, depends on you marrying within the royal line. Even if the guest list at your wedding looks suspiciously like last year's family reunion, invitations are optional. Attendance is mandatory. The big day itself is a spectacle. Gold, lotus blossoms, more perfume than anyone can tolerate, and a crowd of priests making sure you recite the correct vows and don't accidentally marry the wrong cousin. Everyone is dressed in their ceremonial best, including you. Even if your kilt feels a little tighter than usual, and your new spouse is busy plotting temple renovations instead of practicing small talk. The banquet is legendary. Honey cakes, roast goose, and a seating arrangement that requires a mathematician and a priest to decipher. By the end, the family tree looks even more like a pretzel. Of course, love and marriage in the palace are about more than just ceremonies. Every royal union is a strategic alliance, a way to consolidate power, claim a divine right, or secure a fragile peace. Your spouse might also be your advisor, your rival, or, at certain festivals, your backup for dancing duty. If there's any awkwardness about sharing both a throne and a family portrait, nobody mentions it out loud. Instead, the scribes quietly add another layer to the official genealogical scroll, and the palace cats offer knowing looks. The real challenge comes with managing expectations. Your mother-in-law is also your aunt. Your stepchildren are also your cousins. Half the palace is somehow related to you by blood, marriage, or one regrettable festival. Every family dinner is an exercise in diplomacy. Passing the figs without offending anyone, answering pointed questions about succession, and pretending not to notice the heated arguments between rival branches of the family. If a plate gets broken, it's tradition. If someone storms out, it's divine drama. The pressure to produce heirs, preferably lots of them, is relentless. Priests offer fertility blessings, relatives offer unsolicited advice, and somewhere in the harem, a scribe keeps a running tally. Each child is celebrated, but also weighed, measured, and assessed for potential as a future pharaoh, or at least a future troublemaker. The palace nursery is a bustling hub of tutors, nannies, and on especially wild afternoons, wrestling matches disguised as leadership training. Even with all the strategic marriages, love sometimes finds a way. Secret glances across the throne room, late-night strolls by the reflecting pool, and the occasional poem exchanged under the watchful eye of the palace guards. Of course, even these moments are meticulously recorded by the court scribes, because nothing says romance like a permanent entry in the royal archives. Still, you make it work. Ancient tradition might dictate your love life, but you find small joys, an unexpected laugh, a genuine conversation, a shared victory over yet another family crisis. The royal shrub may be tangled, but its branches are resilient. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You've navigated the palace of love, marriage, and near-constant déjà vu. Your ancestors would be proud, or at least they'd be thoroughly entertained. Every day, someone predicts doom or an excellent harvest. The priests read the entrails, the astrologers read the stars, and you read your patience limit. Blame Mercury retrograde for everything. Being pharaoh means you're not just the king of Egypt, you're also the kingdom's official receiver of news, both good and ominous. There's never a dull moment, because no matter what the weather, the economy, or the state of your digestive system, someone is always interpreting the world's weirdness as a sign from the gods. Let's start with the priests, who are the original morning news anchors. Only instead of reporting the weather, they analyze the spiritual forecast. This can mean anything from finding a weird-shaped cloud over Thebes to discovering an unusual number of frogs in the palace pond. If the palace cook burns the bread, it's a sign. If the cats sneeze, it's a sign. If you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, well, that's a sign too. Ancient Egypt is less cause and effect, more cause and whatever someone can write on a scroll. Then there are the animal entrails. Yes, you heard that right. If you ever wanted to know what your week is going to look like, just ask a priest to dissect a goose and read the pattern of its intestines. Will the Nile flood be bountiful? Is there a famine coming? Did your enemies just put a curse on your left sandal? All will supposedly be revealed in the divine roadmap that is the inside of a bird. You, as Pharaoh, are required to look deeply impressed. And, if you're squeamish, at least try to keep your lunch where it belongs. Of course, no court is complete without the astrologers. These are the palace's stargazers, standing on the roof with their charts and calculations, debating whether the full moon spells good fortune or just another night of restless cats. The astrologers produce a steady stream of reports, sometimes optimistic, often dire, about planetary alignments, lucky days, and, on especially fun afternoons, dire warnings about Mercury being angry. Mercury is always angry. It's his thing. Every morning, your first briefing includes a summary of the latest portents. A scroll is unfurled, the court priest clears his throat, and you brace yourself for the news. A goose has flown north instead of south, a loaf of bread split in three, and 2 scarab beetles were found wrestling on the kitchen floor. Interpret as you see fit, O Divine One. You nod, take notes, and quietly consider scheduling a national holiday the next time an omen predicts anything remotely pleasant. Then come the dream interpreters, who are absolutely certain that whatever you dreamed about last night is of cosmic significance. Dreamt about fish? That's prosperity. Dreamt about falling? Change is coming. Dreamt you were running late to a banquet in your undergarments? The kingdom is probably safe, but your dignity is in danger. Each interpreter insists their version is correct, and heaven help you if you disagree. The last time you did, 3 priests argued for a week, and the royal cat developed a mysterious limp. The real fun starts when all the omens and prophecies disagree. The priests say this year will be abundant. The astrologers say prepare for drought. The dream interpreters suggest you take a vacation. Meanwhile, you're just hoping for one day without a cosmic warning attached to your bread. When in doubt, blame Mercury. If anyone questions your decisions, just gesture vaguely toward the sky and mutter about retrograde energy. Works every time. And so, as another day of divine predictions swirls around you, you realize that even as a living god, you can't escape the power of bad omens, conflicting horoscopes, and a palace full of people convinced the world is ending again. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You've survived the omens for today. Tomorrow will bring new prophecies, new disasters, and, if you're lucky, maybe just a single sign that everything will turn out fine, if Mercury ever cheers up. You spend a suspicious amount of time prepping your own funeral, choosing shroud fabrics, testing sarcophagus lids, and making sure the tomb painters get your best angle. Because in Egypt, your afterlife rating matters. For the living god of Egypt, it's never too early to start thinking about the afterlife. In fact, you've barely slipped into your latest gold collar before a priest sidles up with the latest design for your eternal resting place. There are blueprints for pyramids, shopping lists for alabaster jars, and a color palette for wall murals that make your palace's Instagram grid look like amateur hour. First up, location, location, location. Ancient Egyptian real estate is all about the west bank of the Nile, where the sun sets and souls depart. The priests insist this spot is vital to your eternal journey, even if it does mean your future neighbors will be a bit dusty. You're presented with maps of burial grounds, each one promising the perfect combination of scenic desert views, proximity to the temple, and, most importantly, no chance of your pyramid being mistaken for your cousin's. Then comes the interior design phase, arguably the most stressful part of being pharaoh. You're shown samples of shroud linen, each more expensive than the last, and all of them indistinguishable, except for their ability to generate heated debate among the Royal Textile Committee. You must pick a sarcophagus. Should it be basalt or gold? Human-faced or jackal-faced? Is 2 layers enough, or does a real pharaoh go for 3? The artisans bring you clay models and try to upsell you on extra amulet storage. If you hesitate, they'll recommend the deluxe package. Built-in curses, snake motif, and complimentary scarab. No Egyptian burial is complete without grave goods, and that means inventory. You make lists of jewelry, clothes, sacred scepters, and the occasional board game, because eternity is long and you don't want to be bored. The priests assure you that you can't take it with you is just a modern rumor, and you nod, slightly worried you'll still need a bureaucracy in the afterlife. Food and drink for the afterlife are a whole separate ordeal. Your kitchen staff spends years perfecting funeral bread and immortal onions. Special jars are packed with everything from honey to duck fat to the least inspiring beer Egypt has ever brewed. There are enough pickled delicacies to stock a small bazaar, all sealed in decorative canopic jars guarded by deities with the heads of animals, birds, or on one occasion, a very confused cat. But the real focus is on art. Tomb painters bustle about, arguing over your best angle, should you be smiting enemies with a single swing, or accepting offerings from the gods with a smouldering look. You settle on a tasteful mix of heroism and modesty, knowing that generations of archaeologists will be judging your afterlife brand. The painters, meanwhile, slip in tiny details, your favorite sandals, the palace dog, and one immortalized beetle who, rumor has it, was the real power behind the throne. Every decision is critiqued by the priests, the court, your mother, and at least 3 advisors who know a guy with better tomb connections. You sit through planning meetings about ventilation shafts for the soul's easy passage, cursed doors, optional but recommended, and the optimal number of false chambers to foil grave robbers. There's a running joke that the only people who spend more time in your tomb than you will are the decorators. And just when you think it's all finished, someone invents a new burial custom, and it starts again. You sigh, sign another scroll, and remind yourself that, in Egypt, your afterlife review score is more important than your current popularity. Congratulations, O Eternal One. You've planned your own funeral, again. If nothing else, you'll go down in history as the world's first project manager who never truly clocks out. Who cursed the royal sandals? Why is the vizier growing feathers? Pharaohs live surrounded by spells, superstitions, and magical accidents waiting to happen. The scarabs are not always symbolic. Life as pharaoh isn't just about golden crowns and public adoration. It's also about navigating a minefield of magic, curses, and the sort of supernatural blunders that make you question whether the gods are laughing with you or at you. If you thought palace politics were tricky, try surviving a day where your own sandals are rumoured to be hexed, and the palace cat gives you that look after you've walked under a sacred fig tree. Let's start with the basics. Everything in ancient Egypt can be cursed, blessed, or both, depending on who's doing the chanting. Your palace is stuffed with amulets, scarabs for protection, ankhs for eternal life, and little carved hippos to ward off nightmares about, well, actual hippos. Every doorway is daubed with charms. Every meal is tasted for both poison and spiritual contamination. If something goes wrong, a vase breaks, a pigeon flies in through the wrong window, you stub your toe on the way to the temple, it's never just bad luck. Someone, somewhere, has definitely invoked the wrath of a minor deity. Your court magicians are the ultimate multitaskers. Part scientist, part wizard, part crisis manager. They are called to solve everything from unseasonal weather to mysteriously vanishing sandals. Did your favourite gold sandals suddenly disappear, only to reappear full of goose feathers? That's probably the work of a disgruntled servant, a jealous relative, or the gods themselves getting creative. Either way, it's the magician's job to uncurse them, usually involving incense, complicated hand gestures, and at least one frantic prayer to Thoth. And let's not forget the vizier, who is currently experiencing a bout of avian transformation. No one's entirely sure why he's growing feathers, but the priesthood is split between blaming a botched spell and suspecting the palace chef's experimental seasoning blend. The vizier, for his part, is taking it in stride, issuing memos with one hand and plucking at his collar with the other. You offer sympathy, but keep a respectful distance, just in case. Spells are cast for every occasion. New moon? There's a spell for protection. Bad harvest? A spell for abundance. Family dinner with the in-laws? A spell for peace, and maybe a backup for indigestion. Palace magicians maintain a library of scrolls so vast that half the court believes the afterlife is just one long list of incantations to memorize. Even your sandals have their own warding ritual, which involves sprinkling them with natron, waving a palm branch, and reciting a verse about safe journeys. This does not, unfortunately, protect you from tripping on loose paving stones in front of the entire royal court. Then there are the magical mishaps. Every so often, a well-meaning priest gets the words slightly wrong during a morning ritual and accidentally curses the palace cat to nap twice as long, or imbues your best wine with an irresistible urge to foam. Once, a scribe attempting to charm his quill for endless ink ended up with hieroglyphs crawling off the page and staging a small but determined protest in the margins. You supervise the magical cleanup with a mix of patience and resignation, knowing full well the next incident is just around the corner. Of course, some spells actually work, or so the priests claim. The crops come in, the floods recede, and for a brief, shining moment, everyone in the palace walks a little taller, convinced the gods are on their side. Then someone mentions the forbidden word, and all bets are off. At the end of the day, you wash off the lingering scent of incense, double-check your sandals for surprises, and nod politely to the scarab beetles that may or may not be magical spies. You've survived another round of mystical chaos. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You've dodged curses, witnessed spells, and only lost one vizier to feathers. Sleep tight. The scarabs are watching. No one does palace intrigue like the Egyptians. There's always a plot to unravel, a cup of wine to inspect, or a suspicious snake in your bedchamber. Trust no one, especially the court magicians. Palace life might look glamorous from the outside, gleaming walls, lush gardens, and rows of loyal courtiers waiting on your every whim. But beneath the perfume and palm fronds, it's a non-stop obstacle course of scheming, eavesdropping, and strategic flattery. For the pharaoh, staying alive isn't just about smiting foreign enemies. It's about surviving the world's most creative HR department. Let's start with the basics. Trust no one. Not your cousins, not the chief cupbearer, not even the guy whose only job is to wave a fan at you while you eat grapes. Everyone is a potential player in an endless game of palace chess. And you're the king, well, sometimes the pawn, depending on who's plotting this week. The most popular method of ancient Egyptian career advancement? Poison, wine, beer, honeyed cakes, if you're not careful. Even the bread can bite back. Official food tasters are a must, but after the third one gets sick on the job, you begin to wonder if anyone's safe. Rumor has it, the last head chef was caught testing recipes with suspicious herbs borrowed from the palace magician. He was reassigned to pond maintenance, and now the fish are nervous. The harem is another hotbed of intrigue. Ambitious wives, jealous concubines, and ambitious children all vying for a piece of the future. Love notes double as blackmail material. The right amulet slipped under a pillow can bring good dreams or nightmares, depending on how negotiations are going. And then there's the great wife, who always seems to know more than she lets on. You suspect the cats are reporting to her. But poison isn't the only threat. There's sabotage too. Sandals swapped for left-footed pairs, scrolls accidentally misplaced, and rumors spread faster than the Nile at flood season. One day your favorite scribe is there. The next he's been reassigned to external affairs, which, in court language, means guarding the North Gate for the next 5 years. You quickly learn to read between the hieroglyphs. And then, of course, there are the literal snakes. Every so often, a cobra finds its way into someone's bedchamber. Sometimes it's just bad luck, and sometimes it's a message. Either way, you sleep with one eye open and keep your sandals upside down, just in case. The palace magicians claim they can charm snakes, but you're fairly sure they're the ones inviting them in to keep everyone on their toes. If a magician ever offers to cleanse your quarters, double-check your amulet and keep a close eye on your pet cat. Even the walls have ears. Servants gossip, guards trade secrets, and the gardeners somehow know which relative is out of favor before you do. Information is currency, and there's always someone willing to trade a juicy detail for a favor, a better posting, or just a loaf of bread that doesn't taste faintly of experimental seasoning. If someone offers you a particularly nice bouquet of lotus flowers, check for hidden notes or hidden scorpions. As Pharaoh, you develop a sixth sense for trouble. You learn to swirl your wine, swap plates when no one's looking, and always have an exit plan for awkward banquets. Trust is doled out sparingly. Paranoia is just part of the job description. Occasionally, you stage your own trap, serving suspiciously sweet cakes at dinner and watching who refuses a bite. Despite all this, you manage to maintain a semblance of peace and order. The wheels of power keep turning, the conspiracies keep coming, and somehow, you're still in charge at sunset. If you make it through the night without a snake in your bed, or a stomachache from divine honey cakes, you count that as a victory. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You survived another day in Egypt's most dangerous game, the palace. Sleep tight, and maybe double-check under your pillow, just in case. Being worshipped sounds great until you're expected to control the flooding of the Nile and also answer for every bad harvest. The pressure to be perfect is overwhelming, especially when you're just a guy with sandals and anxiety. No one warns you about the fine print in the job description. Living God, ruler of all. Occasional scapegoat for natural disasters. The statues and murals make it look glamorous. Sun discs, golden scepters, the world's most dramatic eyeliner. But under the dazzling Neem's headdress and mountain of divine titles, you're still expected to have all the answers, all the time. Spoiler alert, you don't. No one does. Every day starts with a list of cosmic responsibilities. Is the Nile flooding on schedule? That's your doing. Crops failing? Your fault. Solar eclipse? Better explain that one, Pharaoh, or someone's going to suggest you've offended Ra by sneezing during yesterday's incense blessing. You can't even catch a break when the royal cats have a bad hair day. It's probably an omen, and yes, that's on you too. Being divine comes with an audience. Priests, nobles, farmers, even wide-eyed children line up with their petitions, complaints, and requests for a quick miracle before lunch. A mother wants rain for her barley. A scribe wants his son cured of hiccups. The temple cook wants a new spell for sour beer. They look at you with the kind of trust only found in people who don't realize how human their god-king actually is. You nod, you decree, you wave your scepter with a flourish, and then you retreat to your chamber for a much-needed panic attack. And it's not just the people. The gods themselves are a demanding audience. The priests perform rituals, chant praises, and burn offerings. But if the weather is off or the Nile's muddy, everyone assumes you haven't been trying hard enough. Someone suggests another goat sacrifice, just in case. You'd sacrifice your left sandal for a year without a drought, or a week without being asked to interpret another dream about talking onions. At royal feasts, your face is carved into loaves of bread, your name is sung by choirs, and the conversation always circles back to what you're going to do about next season's crops. You want to talk about philosophy, or maybe how you'd like to invent a quieter kilt, but you're too busy pretending you understand the cosmic balance of Ma'at and how to negotiate with the river gods on a tight deadline. The pressure to project confidence, even when you're barely holding it together, is enough to make you wish you'd been born a humble reed cutter. And when something goes wrong, when the Nile doesn't rise, or locusts arrive, or the price of onions spikes, you're the target for every complaint. A few bad years, and the public starts to whisper, maybe the pharaoh isn't so divine. Maybe the gods are angry. Maybe that weird dream the temple cat had last week is more important than your entire policy platform. The ancient version of a bad poll rating is a crowd of priests at your door, holding incense and strongly worded prayers. You're expected to never show weakness, never sweat under your golden crown, and never let your anxiety show, especially with so many court artists lurking, ready to immortalize your most awkward moments in painted relief. But in those rare, quiet hours, when the palace finally settles, and the only sound is the distant ripple of the Nile, you allow yourself to just be human. You remember that even the gods have bad days, and somehow, you get up the next morning, adjust your Nime's headdress, and do it all again. You smile, you wave, you perform another ritual for the benefit of everyone who needs a sign that everything will be all right. Congratulations, O Divine One. You survived another round of existential dread with style, sandals, and just enough composure to keep the kingdom running. And in the end, that's about as divine as anyone can hope to be. At last, you retire to your chamber, hoping for a peaceful night. But palace life never truly sleeps. There are guards at the door, whispers in the halls, and the haunting realization that, God or not, tomorrow brings another sunrise and another round of royal nonsense. The palace may glow softly under the gentle light of oil lamps, but peace and quiet are never guaranteed. Your royal chamber is spacious, filled with painted pillars, reed mats, and more scented oil than any sane person needs, but even the most lavish accommodations can't guarantee rest. First, you go through the sacred bedtime ritual, a cup of calming lotus tea, a final round of anointing with perfumed oils, and a priest waving incense around your bed to banish nightmares, bad spirits, and any memory of the day's more humiliating public ceremonies. As you settle onto your carved wooden bed, piled high with embroidered linens and a pillow that's mostly decorative and only mildly supportive. You try to shut out the world. The palace cats file in, making themselves comfortable at your feet, on your chest, and occasionally on your face. It's said the presence of cats wards off evil, but after the third one starts kneading your stomach with its sharp little paws, you suspect they're just making sure you're still breathing. Sleep doesn't come easily. Outside your room, guards shift and murmur, sandals scuffing quietly along the stone corridors. You hear the distant croak of frogs from the garden pools, the fluttering of bats in the eaves, and occasionally the distinct hiss of geese plotting something under the moonlight. If you're lucky, the harem is quiet tonight. If not, muffled arguments drift through the walls, each voice trying to secure a little more influence before sunrise. You lie back and try to clear your mind. The flickering shadows on the ceiling look a lot like dancing crocodiles. You wonder if the court magicians remembered to bless your door, or if your pillow has been booby-trapped with another amulet for prophetic dreams. Your mind drifts back to the day, the endless ceremonies, the awkward poetry, the diplomatic incident over the wrong kind of onions. You start counting your blessings. You lose count. You switch to scarabs, hoping that will help. The sleep you crave is always just out of reach, chased away by 1,000 little worries. Will the Nile flood on time this year? Did you sign the right papyrus scroll for the new irrigation system? Is that strange lump under the sheet a decorative pillow, or has another sacred ibis wandered in? You try breathing exercises, the ones the temple physicians swear by, but all you get is a nose full of incense and a sneezing fit so dramatic it sends 2 cats scurrying and a guard peeking nervously inside. Still, you doze, half awake, listening to the world turn gently around you. Dreams come, vivid and strange. You're climbing your own pyramid, being chased by a battalion of geese wearing royal collars, or you're giving a speech in front of all Egypt, only to realize you're wearing nothing but your ceremonial sandals. Classic. Even asleep, your royal status follows you. If you so much as toss or turn, a servant is on hand to rearrange your linens, fluff your pillow, and, if you look especially restless, offer you more lotus, tea, or soothing words about divine tranquility. The irony is not lost on you. The living god of Egypt, envied by all, lulled to sleep by the same anxieties, aches, and existential dread as any peasant in a straw hut. But eventually, exhaustion wins. Your breathing evens, your mind slips free, and for a few precious hours, you escape the burdens of crowns, court, and cosmic responsibility. Outside, the Nile flows on, the stars spin overhead, and somewhere in the darkness, a new day quietly sharpens its claws. Congratulations, O Pharaoh. You've survived another day. Now let yourself drift, counting scarabs, not sheep, as you sink into the strange, sacred silence of ancient sleep. Tomorrow, the nonsense will return. But for now, rest. Your kingdom, for once, can wait. You may be the living Horus on earth, but your teeth are strictly mortal. Between honey cakes and bread loaded with desert sand, your royal chompers are fighting a losing battle. The palace dentist? He's armed with bronze tweezers, primitive drills, and a prayer. Toothaches are managed with spells, onions, and the gentle judgment of 3 bored scribes taking notes on your wincing. Remember, Pharaoh or not, nobody's breath is divine at dawn. Let's start with the daily menu, because every bite in ancient Egypt is like a little archaeological excavation. That bread you nibble with your morning beer, it's made from emmer wheat, ground with stone mills that generously sprinkle every loaf with bonus minerals, namely sand, grit, and the occasional pebble. Over a lifetime, your molars get worn down like the Sphinx's nose, and your gums know every lyric to the song of, "Why is there something crunchy in my porridge?" Ancient Egyptian cuisine is a dentist's worst nightmare. Honey cakes, dried figs, dates, and onions are delicious, but sticky, acidic, and bound to leave a mark. By the time you hit your royal 20s, you've already got molars ground flat, canines with suspicious cracks, and one back tooth that makes you wince whenever someone mentions the word goose. No wonder the scribes keep detailed records, not of your military victories, but of your visits to the palace dentist. The palace dentist, despite his grand title, is less doctor and more brave soul with a toolkit. He arrives with a tray of bronze tweezers, oddly shaped chisels, and a primitive drill that looks suspiciously like something you'd use to open coconuts. The treatment room is a sunlit corner of the palace courtyard where passing cats, bored servants, and 3 highly attentive scribes gather to observe history in the making, or at least to record your latest whimpers for posterity. There's no anesthesia. The best you can hope for is a dab of numbing ointment made from crushed onions and herbs, which, according to legend, soothes pain and wards off evil spirits. You're not sure it works, but it does clear the room of anyone with a sensitive nose. The dentist examines your teeth, muttering prayers to Imhotep, god of healing, and perhaps to Bastet, goddess of not biting your own tongue. Fillings? Forget it. Cavities are handled with prayers. Stuffing the hole with whatever's handy, resin, linen, maybe a bit of wax if you're lucky, and a whispered promise that you'll cut down on the honey cakes. If a tooth has to go, out comes the bronze pliers. The process is simple. The dentist yanks, you grip the chair, the scribes take notes, and somewhere in the corner, a priest tries to ward off your screams with an extra chant or two. Aftercare is, predictably, homegrown. You're handed a clove of garlic or a sprig of mint, told to chew carefully, and sent on your way with a warning to avoid dates and bread crusts. There's a spell for tooth pain, of course there is, and you recite it before bed, just in case the gods are feeling generous. Breath freshening, in the age before toothpaste, is a whole adventure. Perfumed oils, mouth rinses with wine or vinegar, and the strategic use of more onions, the logic of which escapes you, are the order of the day. You try to smile graciously through it all, but the royal portrait artists have learned to paint your mouth mostly closed. Even as Pharaoh, you're not immune to the universal agony of a toothache. Your subjects may never see you wince, but the palace cats, the scribes, and most importantly, the dentist all know the truth. Behind every god-king's serene expression is a man praying for a world where bread doesn't bite back. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You've survived another round with the palace dentist. Tomorrow's ceremonies will require plenty of smiles. Just try not to show too many teeth. As supreme ruler, your fan mail consists mostly of complaint scrolls. Peasants want lower taxes. Nobles want bigger tombs. Priests want more cows for sacrifices. And your third cousin is angry that her husband was accidentally turned into a crocodile. You nod thoughtfully as scribes read out grievances, all while wondering if you can invent out-of-office messages a few millennia early. Your royal inbox isn't a sleek stone tablet with notifications. It's a mountain of papyrus scrolls, each one a testament to the fact that, in Egypt, everyone has an opinion. Every morning, the chief scribe arrives, trailed by junior scribes carrying armfuls of correspondence. It's less fan mail and more customer support hotline, with you as the world's first overworked help desk. First come the peasants. Their letters are blunt, written in hurried script that leans suspiciously toward "give me bread" or "give me death." They want lower taxes, fewer workdays, and maybe, just once, a festival that doesn't involve cleaning up after sacred cattle. Most divine one. A typical scroll begins. The barley harvest was bad, the beer is weak, and the geese have eaten my shoes. Please advise. You nod, smile, and wonder if you can outsource tax collection to the palace cats. The nobles are next. Their complaints are more poetic, but the message is always the same. They want more. Bigger tombs, fancier jewelry, and invitations to feasts where the honey cakes aren't all claimed by the priests. Some request official titles, preferably with land attached. Others merely want your approval for another statue of themselves. The junior scribes do their best to summarize each noble's demands, but you notice they've started using shorthand for "wants a pyramid, will settle for a new chariot." Priests, meanwhile, fill your inbox with a steady stream of divine requests. They need more cows for sacrifices, more incense for rituals, and, on particularly ambitious days, more gold to renovate the temple roof. So it pleases the gods and leaks less during flood season. Occasionally, a letter includes a warning about an ill omen or a proposal for a week-long festival of atonement, always, coincidentally, after a particularly large banquet has depleted the temple stores. You wonder if the gods ever get tired of being so needy. And then there's family. Nothing clogs the royal inbox quite like relatives. Your third cousin writes in all capital letters about the injustice of her husband's transformation into a crocodile. She wants compensation, a public apology, and, failing that, a nice patch of riverfront property. You make a note to remind the magicians that temporary spells should really come with clearer instructions. Of course, every complaint demands a response. The scribes prepare polite, but non-committal replies. The most divine Pharaoh has heard your petition and values your loyalty. The gods see all. Please continue your excellent service. You sign these by the dozen, adding an occasional personal note when a request stands out, like the farmer who trained his goat to sing hymns or the noble who claims his statue cured last year's beetle infestation. On special days, you hold open court, a marathon session where petitioners are allowed to present their grievances in person. The crowd fills the palace courtyard, and you sit on your throne, practicing your most inscrutable expression. Scribes read the most pressing complaints aloud, while you nod sagely, offer vague promises of future prosperity, and hope no one asks follow-up questions. By midday, your patience is thin, and your hand aches from signing scrolls. The scribes leave, the scrolls are filed, and you treat yourself to a moment of silence. You briefly daydream about inventing a magic box that responds to all correspondence with, "Thank you for your feedback. Please try again during the next dynasty." Congratulations, Pharaoh. You've survived another round of ancient customer service. Tomorrow, there will be more complaints, more requests, and probably another cousin turned into an animal. For now, enjoy the quiet. The scrolls will be back. They always are. Your every sneeze, proclamation, and poorly timed joke is painstakingly immortalized on papyrus scrolls. The court recorders miss nothing, especially when you trip on your own sandals during a procession. Gossip spreads faster than the Nile in flood season. Welcome to the original social media, where every post is handwritten, publicly archived, and extremely difficult to delete. The life of a pharaoh is never truly private. Wherever you go, a small army of court recorders trails behind, armed with sharpened reeds and an endless supply of papyrus. Their job? To document your triumphs, your wisdom, and of course your more human moments, like the time you sneezed so violently during a temple blessing that you accidentally knocked a priest's wig into the sacred oil. That incident now lives forever in the annals of Pharaoh's Most Memorable Blessings, Volume 7. The recorders are everywhere. They cluster in corners during state banquets, scribbling down your every toast and every instance you discreetly spit out a questionable olive. At ceremonies, they hover just out of arm's reach, ready to note whether your headdress is slightly askew or whether you really did wink at the high priestess. For the record, you didn't. But try convincing a scribe of that. Sometimes you're not even sure if you're speaking for the room or for posterity. Say something clever, and it's quoted for eternity. Say something less clever, and it becomes a proverb for future generations of sarcastic scribes. Even your private life is fair game. That accidental trip over a stray sandal during last week's parade, recorded, embellished, and circulated around the palace before you even dusted off your knees. The recorders delight in these little dramas, often competing to see who can give the wittiest account. The result, a thriving underground trade in palace anecdotes, immortalized on scrolls and whispered about in the kitchens. But it's not all slapstick. The papyrus archives contain every official decree, every speech, every family squabble, and argument with the head chef about goose placement. If you so much as change the recipe for the royal lentil stew, there will be a footnote, a diagram, and a heated debate among future historians about whether this was a sign of enlightenment or the beginning of dynastic decline. There's also a scribe for every occasion. The chief royal recorder, a man whose beard is longer than most papyrus scrolls, handles all state matters. His team of junior scribes cover everything else: diplomatic negotiations, construction mishaps, harem feuds, and the ever-popular "What Did Pharaoh Really Say About the Hippo Problem" series. They take their job seriously. If you forget to wear your ceremonial kilt on the Feast of Bastet, rest assured that the incident will be written up, illustrated, and archived, with extra copies for the palace library and your mother. The true power of these scrolls isn't just in the official record, it's in the palace gossip. A joke you told at dinner is shared by scribes the next morning, reaching the gardeners and stable boys by lunch. By evening, your words have evolved into a new rumour about palace reforms or a prophecy about the next flood. The recorders are the original influencers, curating the palace narrative with all the subtlety of a hungry scarab beetle at a festival buffet. And heaven help you if you ever try to delete a record. Once it's inked, it's forever. You can try to commission a new version, but somehow the old one always resurfaces, tucked in a library scroll, or recited at the next banquet by that one scribe who never forgets anything. So you learn to live with it. Smile for the scrolls, wave to the recorders, and accept that your entire reign is one long, unfiltered feed. Ancient Egypt, where privacy is a myth, papyrus is forever, and your sandals are never quite as secure as you hope. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You've been trending since 1340 BC. Forget boring lapdogs. Your palace is bursting with animal companions. Faithful hounds lounge under your throne, ducks waddle through the corridors, and somewhere out back, a mildly sacred hippo is ruining the lotus pond. Each pet has a ceremonial role, sacred name, and at least one servant dedicated to picking up after it. Animal chaos is just another perk of absolute power. As Pharaoh, you're not just surrounded by advisors and courtiers, you're up to your neck in a royal menagerie that could out-chaos any modern zoo. Cats may be the official mascots of Egypt, but dogs are your loyal companions, lounging under your throne with an air of dignified boredom, occasionally lifting their heads to judge the latest petitioner or snap at a passing courtier who looks at you the wrong way. Every dog has a name straight out of an epic: Guardian of the East Gate, Sniffer of Divine Treats, or He Who Once Ate a Sacred Scroll, and a ceremonial collar so ornate it could pay for a new wing on the palace. Then there are the ducks. What started as a few decorative waterfowl to grace the reflecting pools has blossomed into a waddling dynasty that considers the palace their personal playground. They parade through the corridors, leave little blessings in the most inconvenient places, and occasionally disrupt royal audiences by quacking enthusiastically at the wrong moment. The court recorders have learned to document these interruptions with a straight face, even as your chief advisor quietly plots a new duck-proofing campaign. The real wild card in your animal kingdom is the sacred hippo. Yes, hippos are technically sacred to the goddess Taweret, but someone seems to have taken the word sacred as an excuse to bring a live specimen into the palace gardens. The hippo, dubbed beloved of the lotus by the priests and that enormous menace by the gardeners, spends its days wallowing in what was once a perfectly manicured pond. Each morning, a dedicated team of animal keepers assesses the damage and prays that the sacred beast will spare at least a few lotus blossoms for the next festival. But the sacred hippo is just the tip of the animal iceberg. You have monkeys, who serve as official bringers of joy, red mischief generators, and a falcon or two, considered direct messengers of Horus. The falcons are beautiful, regal, and prone to stealing snacks from the priests' lunch baskets. Meanwhile, a collection of gazelles grazes in the outer courtyards, meant to symbolize grace and abundance, though their true talent seems to be escaping their handlers and leading a merry chase through the royal kitchens. Every animal comes with its own attendant, whose sole job is to ensure their charge is bathed, fed, and theoretically kept out of the main throne room during state occasions. There are ceremonial duties for everyone. Dogs march in processions, ducks star in harvest rituals, and the hippo gets a crown of reeds at least once a year, just to keep her on the palace's good side. The cats, as always, supervise from a distance, perfectly content to let the other animals make a mess while they bask in the sunshine and receive adoration. Of course, with so many pets comes a daily dose of drama. There's always a report of missing slippers, retrieved by the dogs, stolen bread rolls, the ducks obviously, or a minor flood in the garden, thank the hippo. If a priest's robe is mysteriously shredded, or a diplomatic guest is chased up a pillar, you don't need an omen reader to tell you who's to blame. You simply sigh, send another servant to resolve the situation, and make a mental note to consult the court magicians about animal control spells. At the end of the day, the palace's animal chaos is just another part of your royal routine. They may leave muddy prints, chew up scrolls, and interrupt your naps, but they bring a strange comfort, a reminder that, for all the divine titles and sacred duties, even a pharaoh sometimes needs a friend with 4 legs, feathers, or, occasionally, an appetite for lotus. Congratulations, Pharaoh. You've survived another day in history's most unruly petting zoo. Just watch your step on the way to bed. The ducks are everywhere tonight. So as the moon hangs over the Nile and the last echoes of the temple chants fade into the hot Egyptian night, let's take a moment to reflect on your legendary day as a pharaoh. You've endured family drama that would send modern therapists running for the desert, paperwork that could fill a pyramid, and feasts that, let's be honest, were mostly a vehicle for ancient food poisoning. You've battled sand in every imaginable location, overseen construction projects with deadlines as eternal as the afterlife, and faked your way through religious rituals while half your court plotted against you. You have personally proven that even being worshipped as a living god can't save you from sibling rivalry, dodgy dentistry, or a suspicious cup of wine at dinner. But if you made it this far, congratulations, you survived another day. That's no small feat in a world where every goose has a secret agenda, and your afterlife insurance policy involves 3 rooms of gold, 100 jars of pickled organs, and a tomb that still leaks during the rainy season. And you did it all while looking fabulous in eyeliner and a headdress large enough to get its own postal code. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into your very modern bed, no stone pillows, no sand in the sheets, no angry priests reading out your dreams, maybe give a quiet thank you to all those ancient souls who carried us here. Be grateful for your toothpaste, your private bathroom, and the fact that your relatives probably aren't also your in-laws. Because history may be weird, grimy, and full of drama, but it's also proof that humans are resourceful, ridiculous, and stubbornly hopeful. The past was rarely comfortable, but it's what makes the present feel so soft. Close your eyes. Let the imaginary Nile breeze carry away your worries. Let the distant drums fade, and let yourself drift. You've earned a little peace, a lot of rest, and, most of all, a night free from sacred geese. Sleep well, Pharaoh. Tomorrow, the world will still be absurd, but at least it will be yours to dream about. Good night.